How's everyone doing today? We have a really special opportunity to introduce everyone that's going to be on the webinar today. Today I'm joined by Peter Moon, Laura Lee Solomon, and Douglas Dwayne Dietrich. I am Andrew Bartis. I'm going to be your host so people can get a better understanding of what this Time Traveler webinar is going to be about. So right now, Peter Moon, why don't you come on forward and give people a little bit of sample of who Peter Moon is and how he relates to time travel.
Well, I've been writing about time travel since the early 1990s, featured in the book Montauk Project Experiments in Time and a host of sequels. And in this webinar, I'm going to be concentrating on the mechanical aspects of time travel, the scientific aspects, which I've recently released a series of videos which actually explain the mathematics and physics of time travel so that anybody who understands the Pythagorean theorem will understand that time travel is not only plausible but real. And I will be talking on this theme as well as some others with our guests.
Yeah, and it's going to be special, and I believe they are going to be able to get the two of the time travel videos once they go through the opt-in page.
That's right. We'll release the introductory overview video, and then the first in the series, the invariance of the space-time interval.
Okay, so up next is Laura Lee Solomon. Come on down. You are the next contestant on the Time Traveler webinar.
The Time Traveler webinar. Well, we're all travelers through time, whether we want to be or not. And most of us really don't. But our travel through time is in one particular direction, and that is from the past and into the future. It's been attributed to any number of sources and used again and again in the motivational arena, but the quote, "the best way to predict the future is to create it," is the occultist's perspective on that travel through time and that journey into the future. So how we create it and what we create happens at any particular point of decision, and it's very interesting to note the kind of influences that bear on us at any particular decision point to bias our decisions in a certain way. And this is happening to larger and larger numbers of people, and for that reason I would like to talk about, in the context of that travel into the future, psychic self-defense and being at cause in one's own life.
Thank you so much, and that is one of those subjects that is also very near and dear into my heart. You know, being here in the present of the mighty I Am Self, working through time, understanding you are the past, present, and future simultaneously living at once, and we do not have to live as paradoxes. There is the spiritual, and then there's the technological version of time travel, and that's some of the great expanses of conversations we're going to be exploring. So next I'm going to bring up Douglas Dietrich. You're the next contestant. Come on down.
Have to unmute first. It's
there
great
we
to
go.
be here. Well, this is a form of time travel for me. I'm actually traveling into the 21st century because I've been stuck in the 20th for quite some time, and we're just learning how to use this Google Plus in which to communicate with each other. So this is quite the alien experience for me. Hopefully it'll become more comfortable as time progresses and we do more of these conferences and webinars, and I'm looking forward to that. Just happy to be here right now in the Google Plus I guess it's kind of like a chat room, really.
Pretty much a video chat room, so we're all sitting around our individual tables and we're going to be sharing conversations. Douglas, you are known as the renegade military historian. How is it you came across that name?
Well, because of what we'll be doing today in many respects, basically kind of going renegade and talking about the Department of Defense and its researches into these areas, oftentimes through very dark and foreboding tunnels of research. And we'll be going down some of those rabbit holes today, and I think that it's very helpful that we give people kind of a perspective on just whether their tax dollars are going. And their tax dollars are going into places that would utterly confound them because they wouldn't have any immediate practical application as far as your average taxpayer is concerned. So they might wonder as to why people are investigating abstract areas of temporal research in terms of the Department of Defense and exactly what the Department of Defense has concluded, exactly what it feels its enemies, quote unquote, or neutrals have done. There's no real friends in that kind of world. So you have a world in which maybe people are either neutral or they're adversarial in their context. So there's always an attempt to try and steal information, find out what kind of information is out there that is being exploited by other organizational entities, and the end result is to try and use that to your advantage. Now, of course, they're operating on a paradigm that is alien to your average taxpayer, whether they're American or whether they're a citizen of another nation state. So we'll go into some of that alienness tonight.
Great. So, Douglas, how is it that you know both Peter and Laura Lee?
Well, in a sense, the same way I know yourself, we all took an interest in each other when we began to expose ourselves. And in my case, I exposed myself as a public informant. Certainly, we've gone into this in some of our interviews before, the difference between a public informant and a whistleblower. So as a public informant, yes. I'm definitely someone who attracted the attention of people such as Peter Moon, who's an investigative author, and he had been investigating these topics for years, basically throughout his adult life. And so when I basically stepped forward, he basically just saw me and pursued it. And with Laura Lee Solomon, she was pursuing very esoteric research, and what I brought up tangentially connected to that. It was the dark side of her research, doing basically deconstructive, shall we say, it had a deconstructive agenda on a mass scale, as opposed to her constructive agenda on a personal scale. So while she was a member of various organizations that were seeking to enlighten the individual who was voluntarily seeking such a ladder of progress, in my case, these were individuals who were seeking a kind of mass destruction through the exploitation of such processes. We'll go into a bit of that tonight. We'll talk a bit about their misuse or their abuse of Kabbalah.
I want to bring in Peter here real quick. Peter, so you have done lots of books with the Montauk expression, and as well as been interviewed by Douglas, so on. So why don't you come in here and tell us how you related to this scenario?
Okay. How I came into this scenario with Douglas, or just in general?
In general, how did you meet Douglas, and how is it that led us to a time travel webinar?
Well, as Douglas alluded to, I've been pursuing these topics for many years, over almost a quarter of a century, and I actually had gotten interested in Douglas Dietrich. It was a very mysterious process, actually. I had been listening to the audio tapes of Mae Brussel, who was the mother of conspiracy researchers. It had to do with some other research I was doing, and I was listening to Mae's lectures, which were not available 20 years ago. They're now on YouTube. She was investigated the JFK Warren Report, and she showed how so many things traced back to occult organizations, and particularly with regard to the so-called Fourth Reich, the Operation Paperclip Nazis. Her research pursued until the 1980s, when she began to investigate the Presidio scandals that took place at the Presidio base. And when I was listening to those, her last video, when she began to investigate the Presidio base, she mysteriously died, contracting cancer and dying rapidly of a cancer that was very similar to that which killed Jack Ruby, and that which was researched with Judith Baker, David Ferry, and Lee Harvey Oswald. They were doing advanced cancer, how to kill Castro with cancer, and this sort of thing. And this was apparently used on Mae. And in any case, but only after she began to investigate the Presidio scandals. So I had and her research cut off at that point. And because this involved Satanism, I sent an email to a friend of mine who I helped kind of get away from a satanic situation in the Midwest. He was being pursued by this femme fatale Satanist. And anyway, I sent this link to him, and he sent back a link to Douglas Dietrich, and he doesn't even know how he doesn't even remember sending it because he didn't know who Douglas Dietrich was. I sent him an email, he sends me back a link, and that's how I found out who Douglas Dietrich was. I began to listen to everything I could find on YouTube from Douglas, and then I found out he had a radio show, so I then called in on this number thinking I was going to listen to the radio show, and I ended up in the dock and to talk, and I ended up talking to him, and so over a long slow, I eventually met him in San Francisco, and we've become friends and colleagues here.
So, Laura, how is it that you've come to this area? I know that you have been working very close with Douglas.
I have been working very close with Douglas Dietrich. I produced 2 of the radio shows he's on. My interest started when I was listening to an interview on him, and it struck a chord with my inner being. But everything I do comes from within, and I'm one of these people who examines everything minutely. And it occurred to me that I needed to first study more. I find out what he was saying in general and in various instances in particular, and that he had his own radio show that I began to, as a listener to, and scrape up the nerve to call in one day. My interest was piqued during the radio shows primarily by his discussion with a woman who was dealing with who was working with an organization that was involved with the nuclear veterans, people who were nuclear test participants of the United States. And I had been married to a man who was a nuclear veteran with some of the classic symptoms, and things just built from there.
That's an incredible story. So I know everyone here individually. I've both interviewed everyone here. So it is a group of people that have come together with this time travel scenario as the multi-focus here. You know, we have different points of view. So one of the perspectives we're going to be about here is empowering people. That's the most important thing, is because sometimes information can be scary, and we don't want you to be afraid. We want you to be empowered with this information and able to do something with it in your own locus reality. So I want to bring in Douglas here for a second. Douglas.
Yes. I'm finally getting the hang of the mute and unmute with Google+, so hopefully this goes a bit smoother.
It is. So let's talk about how some of this information has empowered people. Since you decided to be a public informant, there have been many other people out there that have begun to understand on a bigger scale what it takes to be a public informant. And for this particular webinar, it's not necessarily public informant. This is something that is meant to bring information to people so they can say, yes, we know this is real. Yes, we know this is a part of our reality. Let's now begin to incorporate these concepts so we aren't afraid of it anymore.
Yes, well, I think that that's the main crux of what we're doing with the webinar and with everything we do, is to try and actually abate the fear that is so much a part of the pornographic aspect of the alternative information media distribution networks. Most of what we have out there is incredibly oriented towards fear-mongering, towards fear porn, and what we're doing is trying to disabuse people of such notions and allow them to realize that there is a positive aspect to all of this, that there's action that can be taken. Now, you've spent a great deal of your career taking such action and trying to help other people or educate other people into taking such action. Laura Lee's been doing that much more quietly through organizations that have been doing that with people who have voluntarily sought them out. So this is definitely one of those areas in which we're helping to basically heal a lot of people from the damage that's done to them by people who are claiming to quote-unquote wake them up. And we've got a lot of people out there who are assuming the quote-unquote Paul Revere hat. They're going out, they're doing the shouting. Okay, in the end, there's only so much shouting you can do before you really are
Or you
obligated
lose
to
your
start.
voice.
Yeah, yeah, to start presenting some solutions. And I think that Laura Lee Solomon is far more here for that than myself. I think you're here for that far more than myself. I present solutions, but they're mostly on a geopolitical level. When it comes to this kind of subject matter, I'm going to present what information that I know. I think it can help in all of us assembling more context for some claims that seem otherwise fantastic by giving it credibility in the fact that the government has pursued it, come up with some research results, and in the end, we're going to use that to try and contextualize people who say, for instance, that we find almost offensive in their portrayal of time travel. There are people out there that I know for a fact just make some people angry. A great example, without insulting him or saying that he's a crackpot or a fraud, would be Andrew Basiago. Andrew Basiago makes very definitive statements. These definitive statements,
very definitive.
Yeah, are hard for a lot of people to swallow and actually make a lot of people angry. Now, from my perspective, the background that I come from, someone like Andrew Basiago, who I've met personally, and I think he's absolutely sincere, and he's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. But from my background of PsyOps, I would say that my impression would be that he is a victim of a very serious mind control program that has cascaded memories into himself and many other people who basically verify what he says. There are other people aside from Andrew Basiago who simply probably the most assertive of his of what's happened to him, of his experience.
Of that
there are
group
other people,
that group that came forward. Exactly.
Yeah, there's a group of people who confirm and reinforce what he says about Project Pegasus. So what do we make of this? Either it's real, or all of these people are conspiring, which doesn't seem to be the case, because other than agreeing and reinforcing each other's experiences, they do not necessarily decry each other, though some of them do. Some of them do dismiss each other as frauds. I mean, I've seen that in that crowd. So I think that ultimately they're all victims. But does that mean this whole phenomenon is a fraud? Absolutely not. It means that the government is conducting research into time travel. Only some people are conducting other areas of PsyOps to discredit that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
and that's where Peter Moon comes in, because
Yes,
Peter Moon was dealing with David Anderson, and Dr. David Anderson is someone who has received funding, and he's come up with some conclusions, and Peter Moon is here to describe that, and has done so, and will be continuing to do so, whereas I'll be describing other areas of research, and Laura Lee Solomon, in the end, will be kind of giving us the most precious information of all, what you can do personally to kind of empower yourself as you continue your own personal journey through time.
So, Peter, step on down here.
Okay, so yes, I wanted to say there, as we move into the subject of time travel, and alluding to what Douglas was just saying, you can't separate time control or time travel from mind control, because we're all controlled here in a reference to time that we're not completely in charge of. Time consumes everybody. It is the biggest adversary there is in terms of living as a single organism. And when you talk about adversary, well, that's really the etymological word for Satan, adversary. And Douglas has had some firsthand experience in that. With reference to where he worked and whatnot, and for those people who are familiar with his history at the Presidio. However, as we move into the realm of understanding time travel, there is this phenomena of mind control, and that is a side tunnel. I mean, one has to acknowledge the mind control, but one must not get stuck there. We have to move beyond the mind control to understand the mechanics and the actual spirit power of the spirits underneath, and that refers to your own personal spirit. So as we move from the mind control paradigm, we'll move into the paradigm of what we might call jinn or demons and this sort of thing because they are the control points. We talk about mind control. If you go a little higher than mind control, you have spirit control. That means spirits being controlled, such as the individual. You also have spirits controlling the individual or attempting to control the individual. And with particular reference to the collective, you have spirits controlling censorship, spirits controlling institutions. So this is the subject we will broaden out into as we open up this discussion. So this is, underneath all of that, you have divinity. So that's what this is the direction we're going in. And obviously, everybody here has not only a little bit to contribute, and not just one facet, because all of us can talk on all of these levels.
Exactly. Peter, thank you very much. Laura, I want to bring you in here and I want to talk about empowering because both Peter and Douglas, they're going to have tremendous amounts of information. So when people hear and process this information, some of the most incredible techniques that you can do is breathing through, living in the moment of the now, so the information doesn't change you, but you still learn it.
Absolutely. Well, the central point that everyone has to get to is, once they get all this information, is coming to the point where you determine that you might be subject to these things, but you refuse to allow yourself to be a victim of them, claiming responsibility for your own life. What happens to you is not as important as how you respond. And the ability to stand in the core of your own being and make a reasoned response, not based on what everyone is saying, but what you have been able to intuit about where you need to go and what you need to do in your own life to progress in a constructive way. And the rest of it is something that you can't necessarily change anyone's mind if they have determined that they are a victim of something and they are going to persist in the drama of that victimization. You can't necessarily save them from that, but you can chart your own course to a greater extent than you might imagine.
Exactly.
But
chart your own course.
It all involves working with the level of your being called soul and standing in that place and getting aligned with that and the universal power, because you are, in fact, an aspect of God in incarnation.
Right, you are absolutely right. You are that aspect that's in the moment of now, that's in the incarnation. And that incarnation has a shared reality rule called time. We all use it. We all use the language. We all agree to Roman numeral time right now. This is what I call fraud time. Why is it fraud time? Because it's still related to the Babylonian money curse. From the moment that you come into this world, you are stamped and labeled as chattel with value. We are invaluable, immeasurable beings of light. And that is the way we exchange energy and the way we may have different processes. The mechanical value of time travel and the spiritual value of time travel, they're both one and the same. They're just different parts of the fork on the road. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to this little sample here of what you're going to be getting for the time travel webinar. From everyone here, we'll see you on the other side.